afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast State of the Balance with me, your host, Imperial Dane, a master of analysis and other stuff. Covering here April. Certainly not a lot. Some sense have changed compared to sort of last month. I mean, there wasn't exactly a lot of big balance changes, if any, really. We've sort of got now a patch here. The sort of big things that are going to be happening here with this, like, next week. The next balance preview, which of course means lots of community testing and, of course, a lot of changes. But essentially, sort of compared to last month, the changes are all sort of Oberkommando-West is more or less, for example, the same spammy mess, a lot of Volksgrenadiers, a lot of Panzerschrecks, Jaegers, Fallschirmjägers, MG-34s. I mean, essentially what's changed is essentially fortifications sort of make a slight return, I suppose, as sort of people return to that. Flak half-tags a bit there, of course, fast Luxors, Panther 4s, a few King Tigers, Panthers, Yak Panthers are, well, largely out of the picture, really. I suppose you can say that's it. Most people, I don't think, at least sort of what I'm viewing, don't really much bother with the Panther. Of course, some still do, but it's just primarily the Panther 4, since that's, well, really what works at the moment. That's the Oberkommando-West. Of course, in that sense, my overall sort of suggestion there, well, the Command Panther also works, because in part, again, it does have an ability, which does make it a bit more useful, plus you don't actually build towards it, so in theory, in some ways, it's actually a bit cheaper than the actual Panther, in a strange way, but not really. And really, sort of, again, looking at the Oberkommando-West overall, again, it's sort of the same changes we always recommend, more or less, remove Panzerschreck from Volksgrenadiers, remove a Kettenwerfer, give them a new unit, instead give Volksgrenadiers assault rifle upgrade, but instead make it single shot with a sort of inspired assault ability that makes it sort of full burst, but also makes them easy to kill. I think that would work out reasonably well for the Volksgrenadiers-ish. And of course, give the Jagdpanzers machine gun and again look into somehow fixing the Panther again, possibly enforcing it, sort of being up sort of a different path, so like a bit like the British, I get a Panzer 4, or you get the Panther sort of sense. Then the Panther actually becomes a bit better, but also at the same time there'll be sort of slight series of different upgrades into sort of different units as well, sort of making a bit more choice between the two, where the Panzer 4 might get sort of more directly better upgrades, against with the Panther you just get a better tank. Beyond that, there's not really so much else to say about the Oberkommando-West, which is probably why I started with it. It's more or less same old, same old. Nothing really has changed there, but really needs to change. Hopefully, the community preview here and all the stuff there can hopefully sort of, hopefully Relic, of course, needs to make the changes that's wanted, but, freshen up the Oberkommando-West. If we then sort of take a look at the Allies, the Americans, not a lot has changed there either. I mean, again, they tend to sort of move in blocks again. 1 month it's destructions, next month it's destructions are popular, though heavy cavalry is overall still quite popular. Rangers, Pershing, doesn't really hurt as a combo, for example. Armor sort of here and there as well. A few sort of more eccentrics are using airborne sort of for some interesting bits there. Personally, I also like airborne, but beyond that, it tends to be, well, not so much there. There's sort of real change there again. We're seeing more and more players beginning to use Lieutenant, M20s, 50 calibers, and a bit half-track, but otherwise it's still dominantly captains into Shermans. Lots of Shermans with a few Jacksons, Scots. They don't really see much usage. I'm not entirely sure if it's because the Scot was bad or because the Sherman is just too good. I mean, the Scot is still basically a very mobile artillery piece with free smoke, which rather makes a bit tricky sort of to buff up. So, less sure about that one. Because the problem is you buff the Scot too much, you're just going to sort of make it easier for it to sort of just murder infantry, which is reasonably good at. So I don't know. My best suggestion might actively just slightly reducing the cost of the Scot. Just slightly. Not by a lot, just slightly. Possibly just by 5 fuel and, say, 20 manpower. And just then see what happens, because sometimes it just seems a slight notch might cause people to check out a unit, and then all of a sudden, stuff changes. That's rather what I think I'd suggest here, just for the hell of it. I think overall, sort of like airborne, more specifically the P-47 strafe with all the rockets, could actually do with a cost reduction rather than buffing and just make it similar to every other air sort of assault, and particularly the German one. Try to make it a bit more like, something a bit more American. Not that accurate, but on the other hand, you can get a lot of it. I would say roughly 180 munitions, so it doesn't become too spammable, but still, has some presence and isn't too bloody expensive for what it doesn't do. that is hit the target half the time. So I think that would overall be more of an interesting thing. They're sort of more using it as an area of denial element rather than just, something actually used to kill stuff with. Beyond that, I don't really think there's as much as game with the Americans. They're quite powerful. Oh, that's also very important. We're seeing more bazookas. Bazookas really have been proliferating these, last 30 days. Really a lot more players begin to realize, holy crap, the bazooka might not be good individually, but get a bunch of them and they can actually take the German panzers to task. Again, similar with BARs, again, really growing out. And of course, there might be a concentration that the BAR is too strong or just other German elements aren't quite as potent. It's a bit more tricky to say there, but at the moment, I probably wouldn't recommend any nerfs there. But again, do be wary of it, and again, also be do wary of lots of bazookas. If you do see it, do try to get out some machine guns or infantry to somehow deal with some good, strong anti-infantry elements. Beyond that, that's not all to say there. But again, we are seeing a lot more bazookas from the Americans. At least I am. Overall, that's a bit there to sort of consider, if you will, as well, and something to be wary of, since again it can be quite dangerous quite quickly. But again, it is nice to see Americans sort of beginning to more embrace what they do have available to them in their toolbox. It is very nice to see. Obviously, again, this all will be used in numbers, which to a certain extent is rather what the Americans want, aggressive use of their numbers and tactical sort of flexibility, because again they can tailor their units a lot more than what other armies can do. But beyond that, I don't think there's so much else to say about the Americans. Again, they have strong, advantages, some disadvantages, obviously, which they're supposed to have. But again, they do, strong advantage. Again, more and more players sort of catching on to those bits. So I don't really think so much of seeing again. I do think, again, airborne, mechanized could probably also look into. Again, it's a bit of an awkward fit, and recon support a bit, though I have seen Red Wings make surprisingly good use of it. So I don't know, but probably could also do some slight changes. Maybe sort of change the airdrop there, the big one at the end, so instead maybe some paratroopers in a half track. Just sort of as a thought there. But I don't know, hard to say about that one. Hard to say. Again, I'm a bit worried there about just suddenly making another American element really strong, but they could probably do with a bit more use here and there to sort of just make more elements a bit more useful. Again, recon mechanized probably could do with something. For mechanized, I am less sure. Perhaps just making the half-track call-in for a bit more cheaper. But then again, I think that really applies to all half-track call-ins. I think they overall just need a discount there in terms of manpower, because you're actually putting a lot into a half-track element that's going to be, in most cases, quickly wrecked. And then, of course, you still got the infantry element, but even then, that's still feels a bit much. I think a slight discount there for all, and also includes German ones there, wouldn't be too bad. Moving on, of course, from the Americans, let's not hang about there forever. Of course, we've got the Brits, a lot more emplacements, advanced emplacement regiment, really popular, mobile assault, really popular, commandos, popular as ever, really good, grenades, too good. I really think the light cannon bomb needs a nerf, because really it doesn't make much sense. It's a grenade with more damage than any other grenade and pretty good AoE against units which are primarily 4-man, possibly 5-man in some cases, in very rare cases 6-man, but are all still quite potent, and also in that way much more sort of just wiping out units. Which again, considering the smaller ones, does strike me as a bit awkward. I think they basically need to give up something there. Just something. Either the AoE or the damage. Otherwise, I think it's sort of beginning a bit much. I've had commanders rush straight after my support weapons just to pop a grenade at them, and due to those effects there, they can actually wipe it out, even as I'm backpedaling with, say, a Pack 40. So I think that could do with a slight nerf, that light cannon bomb. Of course, you can then sort of make it a bit cheaper in return, but beyond that, it's not like commanders are bad already, so I would advise looking into that one a bit. Mortar emplacements I also think could do with a slight nerf. Not a huge one, just something, so they're quite not as dominant in 1 versus 1 maps. And again, I'm aware that if you sort of nerf them too much, again, they're going to be completely useless. It's a tricky thing there, and I'm not entirely sure how to do it. I just think there's something there. So obviously, I'm not going to pretend I've got all the answers there. In fact, I probably don't. But that could probably do with a slight looking into. P8s, of course, also become more dominant. I don't think that's a problem, just something you have to be aware of. Again, they might not be super accurate, but again, when they do hit, they do pack a punch, and you bring enough of them, again, they can do a lot of damage, and we are seeing more players bring into them. Again, that can cause problems with Germans. Again, anti-infantry and supporting your tanks with them is kind of need it there. In particular, if they combine it with a trench, we can actually make it very difficult to attack if it's then also further supported with, say, a mortar or a buff force. So, I mean, in that sense, again, we are seeing some more things sort of playing up. And of course, the advanced emplacement regiment is getting nerfed. And of course, the armored car are potent, but not really much there to say. We aren't seeing so much hammer, though. We aren't seeing so much. Well, not hammer, it's anvil. Anvil, we are not seeing so much. I mean, hammer's overall quite potent, comets and so on there. But hammer has sort of fallen a bit out in disuse. I'm not entirely sure. Wouldn't say that Churchill is bad. It's still a pretty tough tank. It's in fact the toughest tank in the game, and can still, take on most medium tanks easily, and even sort of stand out against heavier armor. Again, it's not meant to do that. It's meant to deal with infantry in that sense. Again, it'll do quite well. At most, I might suggest a slight cost decrease there, but even then, I'm rather cautious about making too good again, considering how the British can play. And because again, they still have those really cheap sappers that can become heavy engineers, which again could easily escalate out of hand. So it's sort of one of those things. Is sort of you aren't really sure what the solution is there, but it's has to be a very careful and measured one. Otherwise, it's gonna hurt, and we don't really like that. But overall, most options again sort of run a mobile assault. A few on Vanguard because commandos, but also the airstrike there, which is quite nasty. Churchill Crocodiles have rather fallen out of favour. For most part, still some use them. But again, it's largely a game of commandos. Bren guns are popular, so again, you have to be careful of that. And again, it will require some vehicle play and sort of flanks and attacking here and there, instead of just trying to sort of play into where they're strongest. You sort of want them to sort of try and attack you at points here and there. So it does require sort of more mobile play depending on what faction and sort of what tools you have for it. Which again is also something that wish, again, the Ober Commander S gave them a bloody half track, or at least allow the Kuwang to move troops about. That would be nice. But beyond that, not so much about the Brits. Not sure what I buff beyond that, really. The doctrines, over again, I sort of really think there's just so much hidden potential still within those doctrines. There again, most players just barely use even half of them, so I'm not really much for buffing any of them. And I don't think anyone else is, after advanced emplacement and mobile assault has rather ravaged these last 30 days. So not so much to say there. Moving on to the Soviets. Well, we are getting the maximum nerf. That's a plus. It's not going to say, make it useless. As some will say, it's just going to make it, a lot less, speedy, flexible, and able to survive on its own, and a little less spammable. So, I mean, that's a plus. Penal troops could probably do with a slight buff, but even then, I don't know. I have seen players make good use of them, so it's a bit tricky there, but possibly a cost decrease, even slight one, they just 10 or 20 manpower, could perhaps make them a bit more interesting, or perhaps give them an additional upgrade of some sort, though I'm less sure of what that one would be. Beyond that, I think the Serbs all sort of look pretty strong. They were seeing, a lot of different doctrines for Serb army, shock rifle, partisans, guardsmen. After that last change over the veterans, he has made a huge comeback. We're seeing a lot of guardsmen, also heavy mortars. So in that sense, again, we're seeing sort of more diversification there of Soviet strategy, Soviet tactics, involving different doctrines. Lend-Lease has actually fallen a bit out of favour there, in a surprising twist there, though I'm still seeing some use it. But again, guardsmen really surging back, and we're also seeing a lot more submachine gun conscripts there. So I mean, overall, a lot of plays there, and generally, sort of you want to try and bleed them out in infantry and get out some decent armor, and then, so of course, try not to get caught by their field guns or say swarms of tanks. But I don't really think per se there's much that they need sort of looking into with the surge. Again, penal troops could probably do with a bit there, but overall, as one of the also played Soviets quite a bit, I mean, they're perfectly strong. I mean, I don't have usually the most biggest difficulties winning as the Soviets. So for me, buffing them, in particular some elements, I think would be a rather dangerous move. And again, penal was really the only thing you could sort of imagine could do with a buff really well. The KV-1 maybe a bit as well. That one could perhaps do with something. But beyond that, it's not really that straightforward, and again, I really think a buff in the wrong place could really make things very unpleasant on the receiving end, that is the German end. So that is a little fault there from me as well. But again, I do feel like they're a pretty solid faction with no huge weaknesses Oh, my apologies there, were huge challenges. If you make good use of their elements, they can actually be pretty strong and pretty tough. And overall, also players tend not sort of make full use of their sort of wide variety of tactical abilities, including the mortars tend to be utilized not just for raw power, but also say smoke barrages. That's definitely, I think, something that could be utilized a lot more by Soviet players when we actually attack. And again, doctrinally, I mean, we are seeing variety, which again is always something I consider as a sign of strength. And again, that something is good when we're actually seeing a variety of doctrines. So again, I think things are looking good there for the most part. Again, penal troops probably the only bit I could sort of say, yeah, no, that probably needs a bit of looking into as a sort of rule of thumb. But beyond that, they look pretty strong to me. Again, just, not German, which again is rather how they're supposed to be. Again, a different set of tools for a different, play style. Moving on to the final faction, the Wehrmacht. We're seeing again more diversification. We're seeing more elite troops. Again, stormtroopers rather become, in vogue finally. And as I said, they're cool, and it finally seems to have caught on with people. Yeah, stormtroopers, sie work, yeah. Otherwise, Lightning War still prevails. Ostrom is making a bit of a comeback after having, been rather pushed out there after the veterancy changes there again, making Grenadiers useful. But we are seeing a pushback there. And Mobile Defense, which was, rather absent in action for some time, is also moving back. And as usual, is not faring too well. I'm guessing, again, the Ostrom is a lot more, again, resilient if not entirely sure how to play it. And again, with the absence there, some players might have forgotten how to play against it. And that, of course, will give some players sort of a German players, sort of good chance to make good use of it. So there's a bit there to sort of consider as well. But otherwise, we're seeing Lightning Assault, we're seeing Spearhead, we're seeing a bit of this and that. We're also seeing some variety. Elephants. No, not so much really, no. Not a lot of elephants, if any. The elephant is still an awkward fit alongside the Jagdtiger. Those big clunky tank destroyers, and overall they probably need to look a bit into alongside the Panther. And that sense again, Wehrmacht Tier 4, still an awkward fit, still too expensive. Panther again, overall, I just think needs really serious looking into. They need to just figure out what do they want to do with the Panther, because, in my opinion, in my optics, it's not that good. It's expensive, in particular for the Wehrmacht, it's really expensive, but in terms of firepower it can deliver, it does not live up to set cost. For the amount of resources you put into a Panther, you get 2 Stooks, easily outperform armor that way, or go for several Panzer IVs, deal with armor that way as well, and murder infantry a lot better. So again, in that sense, I do feel like the Panther needs something. Either it needs to be somehow a lot cheaper to acquire, but again, that makes it a bit more tricky, because then, again, it's still tough, and if it's too cheap, it's just going to be too spammable, but otherwise, it needs, damage buff. It needs to ultimately deal with infantry, or needs some kind of rate of fire ability, improvement there. So that's definitely something that needs to be looked into as well. Maybe convert its blitzkrieg ability into some kind of, rapid fire mode for just a few moments, or something else. Sturmpanzer could also do with a bit there. Otherwise, the problem with the Wehrmacht is basically sort of around the tier 1, tier 2 mark. It's still a bit sort of strange. Though again, with the maximum sort of being a bit nerfed there, it might work a bit better, since that's one of the bigger issues. But there's something there I'd like to see. And again, overall, I think I'd like to see the 2/5 and half track get some kind of buff, some kind of change to make it more improved again, possibly replacing the veterans one, I believe, is something else. Again, some kind of German combined arms variant, again, buffing troops around it might be nice, or something else. But over the truth one still needs a buff. Something that also allows you a bit sort of different in play. Beyond that, it's harder to place sort of really what is needed with the Germans as well. Possibly some new abilities mixed in that might make them sort of capitalize a bit better on their support units somehow. But again, it's not like the Wehrmacht is in that poor position. Again, it's basically sort of tier 4, and then again a bit around tier 2 where there's sort of are some awkwardness, and then tier 1 again can be problematic if you're on a series of sort of these rules where you can sort of get pinned down in the early game and sort of end up in sort of a lot of trouble there. Plus, of course, you are very much risky to get your entire units wiped, losing a lot of experience, and then starting to sort of get back in the game. So, hard to say, really hard to say. But again, looking into tier 4, Panthers, bit the half track there, I think would overall yield nice results. In terms of sort of what otherwise is played, we're seeing again variety. Doctrinally, again, varieties. I mean, overall, it's not like the Wehrmacht is too poorly off. It's not like the Wehrmacht's too poorly off. So not so much as they hugely complain about, but still they are having their issues. Again, turning in part again because they can sort of easily pen down, but also because they have somewhat fewer options, sort of realistically being functional. Again, Panther just too expensive for what little it generally does compared to say Panther 4s or Stugs, which is a bit awkward really for what's supposed to be an expensive medium tank, but doesn't really sort of live up to the price tag, at least in my opinion. And for the most part, actually, it's actually fallen out of favour with all the Wehrmacht players. It's either Tigers or Panzer Force now at the moment. Some still use Stugs, in fact, more use Stugs than they use Panthers now. So I think that also says something. And the Panthers just fallen out of favour because it just doesn't pull its weight for the cost. And that is actually a problem there. It just doesn't pull its weight. So really would not advise it. Beyond that, not so much as about the Wehrmacht. But again, overall bigger problems is the Oberkommando again. It's slightly spammy, well, rather spammy nature. The Panzer like Kednev and sort of the battle group headquarters nature, which has sort of been going on for months. But beyond that, in some senses, balance is interesting. There's still sort of a variety of tactics and strategy. So I'm a bit sort of unsure what to sort of really go for in that sense. I mean, in some senses looking nice, but there's still problems. There's still problems, obviously, and there'll probably always be problems in some way or the other. So I think that rather covers it for the state of the balance. Things are looking positive-ish, not without its issues, and most of the issues are sort of centered around the Oberkommando West camp, and a bit sort of the Wehrmacht early game, late game, where there are some hiccups and headaches. And for those coming sort of out, I think we're sort of getting some really interesting stuff there. So there you go. I think that's rather my perspective on the state of the balance. I'm a lot less sure of things at the moment. Again, we're sort of seeing a lot of stuff there, which again is always, I think, a good positive indicator again. And then one we aren't really seeing a lot of things is the Oberkommando West again. I think that's really where a lot of the issues sort of are. And again, there'll be a lot of changes there needed to sort of make them useful. There might be some unit shifted out and replaced and so on there. I think that's sort of primarily it. But again, some buffs and changes and nerfs will probably need done here. But I'm less sure about other buffs and nerfs because I haven't quite got the full confidence in that. But of course, after seeing again, we'll have the balance preview up. And of course, I will cover it. Must even sort of cover larger changes throughout it. We'll sort of get things going there. So, thank you all for joining in. Hopefully this has been enlightening. Hopefully this has given you some ideas against how to play. Again, I sort of tried to sort of count in with some of the more bigger meta tactics and strategies going on there. And with some quick suggestions how to deal with that as well. Of course, if people want some further deliberation of that, of course, I could make a video that further on as well, sort of assist people with that. But that'll be it for today. So again, hopefully this has been useful. If it has, like, subscribe, share it with everyone. Let as many people know. And of course, comments are as always welcome in the comment section. Of course, questions as well. If there's something, for example, has been unclear on, feel free to ask as well. I'll try to sort of further elaborate. So thank you all and see you all another time for something fun. Cheers.